Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Cosmic Perspective. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a recent psychedelic experience that I had, and I'm also going to go into another thing that I think is very interesting, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts because I am a skeptic on this particular topic, and I've seen some things that have maybe changed that a little bit for me. But let's go ahead and just start this out here. Let's start with the meat and potatoes of it. And that is my recent trip. So I had a trip recently, and this trip was something that I kind of planned for a little bit, where I definitely set an intention. I knew exactly what I was trying to do. It was just a matter of just finding the time to do it. But I've been wanting to do it for a while, and so that was going to be another heroic dose. And so for anybody who's listened to this podcast, the majority of you have probably listened to that episode, because I did a heroic dose, and so did Joey, over a year ago. This was like back in March of 2018. And it is my most downloaded episode. So it is definitely the most popular, and I think for good reason, because it is a really interesting thing to do. And it is something that few people are really brave about doing, and even fewer people are probably doing it correctly. People probably accidentally heroic dosing, but not realizing what they're signing themselves up for. But yeah, so I set out the intention, and I knew exactly what I wanted out of this trip. I knew what I was looking for in terms of what I wanted to accomplish, and I knew that I needed the reset. And for me, I actually feel really good in life. More so now, and I'll get into that later. But even before I did the trip, I was already feeling good. So it wasn't really like I needed something to, change my state of mind or anything. One of the main things that I did this for was to try to break some old habits that were kind of stuck, and I seemed to not be making any progress on it. And even though I had every intention of making changes, I wasn't actually doing them. And I don't know what it was and what was stopping me from making these changes. But I felt like a heroic dose was a good way to rewrite the pathways in my brain to hopefully allow me to overcome that and create a new pattern of behavior. So that was something that I really focused on this trip. I really paid attention to, sorry, I'm just going to pull this up real quick because I did make a note here so I don't forget anything. But I wanted to make sure that when I did this, that I actually was going to accomplish this task. I wanted to really overcome some of these habits, and I figured the best way to do it is a heroic dose. So I started at 8. It was just under 5 grams. It was like 4.9 something. So it was basically 5 grams. And as you know, with dosage, it's always, going to be different. It totally is dependent upon the mushrooms themselves. And so you could have 5 grams of one batch of mushrooms and 5 grams of another batch, and the content of it, the psilocybin content of it, could be dramatically different. So for me, it was like, I just need it to be in the ballpark of this because I just want that like transcendent experience. So I took the 5 grams. I still hate eating them, but I did the lemon tech technique. So for anybody who doesn't know what a lemon tech is, it basically means that you activate the psilocybin outside of your body using citric acid, and then you consume it. And at that point, you will actually absorb it faster. Your trip peak will be more intense, and then it will have a shorter overall duration because you're kind of burning through it faster and processing it faster. So I did the lemon tech. I just had some lemonade, and I ate it with the lemonade. And I started to feel it even as I was eating it because, I'm not going to lie, it took me a little bit to eat all 5 grams. But it was a necessary part of the process, and it's fine. And in fact, to me, it makes you feel like you actually earn it because you have to down these suckers. And they're not the worst tasting thing in the world, but what I found is that when I'm chewing them, it seems to just get so much worse. I don't know. But yeah, so I took them. I hung out with Joey a little bit as they were like kind of coming on, because I knew it was going to be a little bit before it really started to kick in. And then at that point, I would want to go in, the Terrence McKenna prescription of In Silent Darkness. And I will say, aside from it being a heroic dose or anything, it's so valuable to do that on the psychedelic experience. I just think it's so valuable to have that alone time and to really just be with your thoughts, because it seems to me that I make the most connections and I have the most profound insights when I am just by myself. I really enjoy a solo trip. I really enjoy the solo experience. There's something about it that is just more effective for affecting change than doing it with a friend. Now, that being said, doing it with a friend is really fun, and you actually can really learn a lot by doing it with a friend too, because you get the benefit of their insights and their perspective. And I've learned a lot from that. So I can't say that you can't get things out of that with other people. You totally can. But for me, I make the most progress by myself. So I take the 5 grams. I'm hanging out with Joey for a little bit, and keep in mind, Joey's basically like my trip sitter. He's not actually actively going to be with me or anything, but he's in the apartment. So I knew that I had him as a safety thing. I'm going to be honest, there was never a threat that I ever needed him. But there always can be. So that's where I would caution anybody who's trying to do the heroic dose. One, make sure that you've tripped enough times that you think you can actually handle it. Level up to the level. Think of it like Breath of the Wild. I know I've watched a speedrunner go through the whole game and not beat any of the what are they called? The fucking big monster things. I'm drawing the divine beasts. That's what they're called. I've seen that happen where you go in and you have no armor and no good weapons, and they just fucking speed run the whole thing using glitches and stuff. But that's not how this works. You really kind of have to level up, and I'm an experienced psychonaut. So for me, a heroic dose, although is still an intimidating concept, I have a lot of the fundamentals of how to keep myself calm during a difficult time, and I've been through difficult times, so I know what it's like to have to give in and accept the experience and let go. So for me, I was really never concerned about it, and I also had a good set and setting. My apartment's awesome. It's a great trip location, and my mindset was already in a good spot. So for me, I kind of checked all the boxes that you need to check for it to be safe, and it paid off for me. It was totally safe, and this was a 100% pleasant experience. There was never a negative part. So I wrote down a little bit of this the following day because I wanted to make sure I had it like a lot more clear. So I'm going to do a little bit of kind of referencing this note here. But I started out by laying down on my bed. And I was just laying there with a little bit. I had my eyes closed. I had blackout curtains, so I closed them to try to get as much darkness as possible because it was just like the afternoon. It was like 2 o'clock or something. And I begin to feel the onset of the trip. I begin to feel like, okay, this is time for you to really like go inward. You're going to be able to go inward. So I start, I close my eyes. I get into the zone. And I start hearing these auditory hallucinations. And these are just like the auditory hallucinations that I had on my last heroic dose, where they're very metallic sounds, very technology, space, UFO. Like, it definitely had that vibe to it. The same way that it had on the last heroic dose, and honestly, the same way it had on DMT. And for anybody who knows that the chemical makeup of DMT is very similar to psilocybin. So there actually is a reason why your body would think it's a very similar experience. And a heroic dose could be compared to a longer version of a DMT trip, but honestly not nearly as visual and not nearly as like you just snap and blast off to that. It's really not like that. But it has a similar vibe, and it certainly feels like you're going almost to the same location, albeit with maybe a different set of eyes. So I am hearing these sounds, and I see this visual representation of a contraption that I can only refer to as like an antenna, or like a radio, like a radio antenna. So it had like an LED on it, and then there was like a ticker that was kind of like almost like a hand on a clock. And this thing is like kind of going back and forth, and the noises that are going on in my ears are just like, and it's like doing this crazy like, clearly trying to hone in on the signal. Imagine it's like somebody trying to lock in on a target. Like, that's kind of how it felt, but with this signal. And I would call this like the frequency of the universe is my best understanding of it. Obviously no scientific basis in that. It just like felt like that. It was this implicit understanding that I was tuning into the frequency that at one point in my past had overwhelmed me and overloaded me and caused an ego death. So this time, though, it was way more attuned, it was way more precise, and it seemed as if my antenna was better at receiving the signal and certainly not overmodulating the frequency. So I didn't feel like, they turned the volume too loud and it was overwhelming. It was like I was embracing it. And in fact, in my head, I literally was saying, like, whatever comes, let's accept the experience. This is going to be what it's going to be, and let's take the most from it. And I think just the fact that I had that attitude already is why I gave it no resistance. So it had no reason to make me suffer or anything, because it knew that I was willing to accept whatever it was going to give me. And I say it because it just feels outside of yourself to some degree. I feel like mushrooms really feels like you're communicating with the organism itself, the mushroom that you ate. So I'm seeing this like metronome clock thing, and it's tuning into the frequency. And once it calibrates, I then start to think about, okay, well, what are the things that I wanted to change? So for me, something that I've been struggling with is certainly my diet, where I cook really nice meals and then I snack on garbage. So like the meals I cook for myself is like, chicken, vegetables. I have like fruits and I make eggs for breakfast. And, I eat a lot of stuff that's honestly like pretty healthy. But then my snacks are like chips or like granola bars or, things that just are not that healthy for you. And I would eat too much of it too. I was like overeating. And I knew that. And I was aware of this, but I didn't know how to stop it because it had so much momentum. And I was always giving in to my temptation. And this frustrated me because I was aware that I was doing it, but I seemed to not have the willpower to stop it, at least not for the last like couple months. So I began to think about that. I'm thinking about, okay, so I want to eat less. I want to eat healthier. And the fuel to my body is ultimately what my body ends up becoming. So if I'm building it with garbage, it's going to be a garbage body, and it's not going to be running as well, and it's not going to be as fine-tuned. So that was something that I focused on. I also focused on how I have been smoking way too much weed. I've just been smoking too much weed, and it's because the pens are way too fucking easy to just hit. They're so easy. You just hit this little pen, and it's so convenient, and you could do it anywhere, and it doesn't smell like weed. And so I found myself doing it just way too often, doing it during the day, and then having to keep chasing the high. And it's just a habit that I've gone back and forth on, where I'm either good with it and I don't smoke that much, or I'm smoking too much. It seems to be no in between for me. I don't know what it is. I just seem to not be good at moderating it, at least in my current state. And I think it's because of a lot of previously ingrained habits, where when I was living at home with my parents, I was so depressed that the only way for me to get through my day sometimes was for me to smoke. And so it's like almost an understanding in my own psyche and personality that is a coping mechanism, and I was using it for that. And that's not a healthy one. It's not. I don't think cannabis is good as a coping mechanism in that way. I think it can be used that way, like healthily. I think there is a way to do it, but I wasn't doing it that way, at least. So I thought about that. I thought about all the intentions that I set before I even got into it. And I could feel this innate power swelling in me. And this power was like telling me, you don't need this shit. You can drop it. All you have to do is release it. If you just release it, you're free. And I was like, okay, yeah, I don't need weed. I don't need it. Like, it doesn't matter that I've bought a bunch of ways to smoke it, or that I've been called Kush Kev before, like any of these other things. Like, none of that shit matters. If I decide that I want to stop doing it, then at any moment I can. And it doesn't even mean quit forever, because I think that's unrealistic, that I'm never going to smoke weed again. I'm sure I will. But I think right now it needs to not be a thing. And so that was a big realization for me. Not necessarily a new one, because I've battled with this. If you listen to any of my podcasts, you'll hear I'll kind of go back and forth on that. And like I said, I have periods. I can easily go months at a time without smoking it. But then when I start to reintroduce it, for whatever reason, it's not necessarily right away, but eventually I fall right back into the habit of doing it every fucking day. And it's because it's too easy. As an adult, you get home, you're literally doing nothing else. You're not going to be productive for the rest of the day. And you think, I'll just smoke. But like, that's not good. That's just it's not a good reason to do it, you know? And then I would smoke it, and it's like I wasn't feeling that fulfilled afterwards. I would just be like, oh, I guess I'm high, and it'd be fun for a little bit, and then I'd be bored of it, and I'd be like, damn, I wish I could just be sober now, and then I could do something else, and then I couldn't. And if I smoked at night, and let's say I wanted to read a book before I go to sleep, well, I'm not going to remember any of the shit I read, so I know it's not worth it. And then my attention span's not going to be there, where I'm not going to even be able to sit there and read. I'm going to have to read the same fucking 5 sentences over and over and over again because I didn't fully process it. And so I knew that just like wasn't working for me. And so that was something that I knew. I was like, all right, I got to cut that. So change the diet, cut weed, and also just thinking about, thinking about my ex. I'm not going to lie. Just thinking about how I already have like moved on, right? So I've already kind of put that relationship behind me. But she's leaving America soon, like super soon. And that was part of the reason why we broke up, was just her legal status here was temporary. And so I think that just created a lot of stress on our relationship. And I thought about that a lot. And I thought about how, it's time to, I'm going to have to, like it or not, like it's already, I've already kind of like let her go in that sense. And we already don't really talk, but I had to, in my own mind and in my own spirit, truly put that chapter to a close. Cause it was already on the last page, but I really needed to close the book, and I was able to do that. And to be honest, we're in a good spot too, between us, because we've talked a couple times since we have broken up, and we're in a good place. There's like no hard feelings. I have all the love and respect in the world for her. She's a wonderful human being. We didn't work for a number of reasons, and she is going to go make somebody really happy someday. And I'm sure she's learned a lot of valuable lessons from our relationship, as I did. So without a doubt, there's no hard feelings, and I got all the love in the world to her. But I knew that was something that I had to put behind me. And I also knew that something that I had watched recently had really resonated with me. So I watched this video, and it wasn't really necessarily a video as much as it was an audio recording, but it was, a video on YouTube. And it was of Ram Dass. And Ram Dass was talking about, and for those who don't know who Ram Dass is, Ram Dass famously came up with Timothy Leary back when they both got kicked out of Harvard for their experiments with LSD, and he became kind of a guru of sorts when he changed his name to Ram Dass, because that's not his original birth name. But I watched a video of him, and he was saying the problem with psychedelics is that it's a high, and like any high, you come down from the high and then you're low again. And that he struggled with that for a bit, and that when he was learning from his masters, his like meditation masters, that he was struggling with certain steps on the later stages of his practice of meditation because of the psychedelics. And although they were great in introducing him to a lot of these concepts and even getting him into the concept of meditating and all that, it seemed to have been holding him back in that way. And so that's what I thought about with weed, was that I felt like weed was a similar thing. And with psychedelics, for me, I still think I'm benefiting from them. So I don't think I'm at the point where I'm like going to do that, like where I'm like, all right, I'm stopping that too, and I'm only going to meditate. I don't think I'm fully there yet. But I do think that is kind of where ultimately I'd like to go, where, microdosing I think is its own animal. So that's something that I would like to continue to do for various reasons. But in terms of overall tripping, I mean, I think it's definitely useful to trip, but it doesn't need to be very frequent. And I already don't trip very frequently. I'm sure this podcast probably gives you the impression that I'm like just tripping balls all the time. I'm not at all. When it comes to actually like having a full-on trip and a full-on experience, it's not super frequent for me. But if I'm going to do it, then either it's going to be for a fun social gathering with my friends, that's its own type of trip, or it'll be for something like this, where I was, self-reflective and I wanted to think about things that I wanted to change. So I was thinking about that a lot, and I was really resonating with that concept. And I was like, you know what? I really do want to gain this power through meditation, through my own body's ability to to process this stuff and to improve my practice and my mental focus. Because for me, it's so important to have balance, and have balance from your internal, your own internal powers or substance, rather than an external one. So I think it's really awesome that psychedelics are able to put you into a state of mind which allow you to see things from a totally different perspective, that take you so far outside of yourself that you now can see a new version of reality, a new possibility. And it certainly is like a shortcut of sorts to these states. But if you want something sustainable, and I've said this a number of times on the podcast, if you want it to be sustainable, you have to do the work in real life. And for me, I needed to give myself permission to do that. I needed to give myself permission to say, you know what, it's okay. You know, you love mushrooms, you love LSD, you love DMT. It's okay to know that you don't need them, or to know that like you can achieve these states without them. And if you leave them behind for a period of time, that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging anybody who's still doing them. I'm like I said, I'm not actually going to quit psychedelics or anything like that. But I just feel like I'd like to see less and less of a desire to even go there, and then only want to go there when I really want to take myself out of my momentum. If I really feel like, you know what, I've been really mindful and really meditative, and yet something still seems like I need to make an adjustment. And then at that point, 100%, I will then want to do a trip, and that will kind of like hopefully give me a new perspective. Because, you know, you get blind spots, especially if you just keep going with the momentum. There's going to be a point where there's going to be something that you're not going to be able to see because of just the way you're thinking. Your thought patterns are just not going to allow you to see whatever the revelation that could be just right in front of your nose. And so that's where psychedelics are great, because usually if your subconscious mind has some sort of awareness of that thing, that it is going to connect your conscious mind with your subconscious mind and allow you to hopefully bring those things to the surface and then address them. And then you can do whatever you want with them once they've been brought to the surface. You know, you could do nothing, and I would argue that that's going to lead to more resistance later, or you can do something about it and make the change. So yeah, so I had that permission for myself to let go of everything, and I felt this just massive weight lifted off my shoulders. I mean, it just felt like I felt so much lighter immediately. I was like, oh. Like, man, I finally was able to admit that to myself in an honest way, that I'm like, you know what? I already can achieve these states through my meditation practice, so I don't need all this other stuff. And it was amazing. And at that point, it felt like almost, not like the trip was over, but like that I didn't need to keep my eyes closed anymore. Like I felt like, oh, wow, okay, I guess I got everything I needed out of that. And it had only been like 40 minutes or so that I had kind of gone through that process. And obviously me giving you this version is a very condensed version compared to what I went through in my experience. But in terms of what's sticking overall and what stood out to me as the most important in that 40-minute period, that was it. So I got up, like went to the bathroom, maybe I grabbed something to eat, and not like a big thing, but like a snack. And then I was going to go knock on Joey's door and like tell him like what I learned. And I knocked on it, but I didn't knock super hard or anything. And maybe he had like headphones in, or he might have been working on music or something. And he didn't answer. And I had this voice in my head that said like, if you try to engage Joey right now, the trip will definitely be over. Not literally the feeling of tripping, but for sure like what I was setting my intention for. It will definitely be over. But if you want, you can go back to your room and you can try again. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to listen to that voice. So I go back into my room and I kind of lay down in the bed for a little bit. And I still don't feel like a calling to actually close my eyes or anything. It's not like I'm feeling like a wave of that intensity where I'm like, okay, ooh, I can go deep in again. But I'm starting to feel like a little bit more like maybe like a second wave or something. And so I lay down on my bed. I'm like looking at my phone. Not actually looking like using apps or anything, but literally physically looking at the phone. And I'm just like, I'm like, this thing is amazing. This is an amazing piece of technology, okay? Never before has any human being been able to have a camera, a phone, an internet browser, a video editor, a photo editor, like a game machine, all of these things all in one. And this fucking thing fits in your pocket. And it made me think about how little people tap into the full potential of these devices, and how much I think people are missing the point, and how much we take it for granted. And I think we do here in America, and really all around the world with all of us with our devices. We take it for granted what these things do for us. And we're really not tapping into their full potential. I mean, we spend fucking half of our time on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all these other apps and Fortnite and all this shit, right? We're spending a lot of our time on it, and by all means, spend your time how you want. I'm not telling you what to do. But to me, it seems like that's not the full potential of these devices. If you want to get the full potential out of it, ideally you want to use the device for something that you specifically need in your life, and something that maybe is fulfilling to you. And if there's a way that you can tap into that thing using your phone, then do it, because it's amazing. It really can do. It's like your Omni tool. It really can do everything for you. And so then I started thinking about like the technological aspect of it. And I started thinking about like where everything's going. I started thinking about like what's the future going to look like, and how is social media going to evolve? Are we able to stop the thing that's happening? Like AI and robots and all of these other things, automation. And I was thinking about, I'm like, man, this process is so big. This process is so much bigger than any one of us. And none of us can do anything to stop it at this point. This is something that we are just doing. And the best we can do is try to put in safety measures and precautions as we're doing it. But even then, we're not going to understand or know what we're doing, because we can't. We're in the middle of it. You're caught in the middle of the wave. You can't see the wave. You're just a part of it. And that was where I was just like, damn. I'm like, okay, so if we're all in this momentum, we're in this big shift, this big cultural shift that's happening, this technological advancement, and none of us can understand it. It is causing potentially irreparable harm on people's psyche, using social media and this comparison culture where we're constantly comparing ourselves to each other via these curated profiles of these fake versions of ourselves. And I thought about how sad that was, and how like, damn, like, is this really what we're doing here? Is this really what we were designed for? Is this what the phone's designed for? And it kind of made me think about the larger picture of stuff. And I actually have you might have seen it in some of like my Instagram lives and stuff. I have like a tapestry of a nebula, and I can't even remember what the name of the nebula is, but I have a tapestry of this nebula, and I was looking up at that, and I was just like, damn, I'm like, we're so small and yet so significant at the same time. And I started thinking about whether there was alien life out there. And so that's where things got kind of interesting. So I just watched the Matrix trilogy for the first time, and I know that is amazing that this is the first time I've fucking seen it, because I'm such a sci-fi person and such a tech nerd and all that. But I just never watched it as a kid. And then my family really just wasn't the type that like bought DVDs or even rented them. So if I didn't see it in theaters, which I also didn't do that very often, then I definitely didn't see the DVDs. And I only started really seeing a lot of like classic movies that people would have expected me to see as somebody who went to school for video production and filmmaking. I didn't see a lot of them until streaming services made it easier for me to just consume a bunch of them. So I started thinking about The Matrix, and I started thinking about the concept of everybody waking up, and the idea of us activating ourselves and affecting our change that way. And the more people that activate themselves, the more that they are able to affect the people around them and transform the culture. And I talked about this with Angela in our podcast about, hey, if you guys want to change the game, we can change the game. It's up to you guys. Because I'm already trying to do it in my own life. So, it's on you guys if you guys want to do it in yours. And then if we all get together, we have a lot of numbers. We can really make a difference. And so then I start thinking about some of the questions of free will and determinism, because that is a big question of the Matrix. Does Neo really have free will? Did he really make any choices, or was everything pre-programmed? Was everything predetermined? It is what it always will be. And to some degree, as things happen is the only way that they could have happened, right? Because that's how they happen. But Did you have any control over the moments leading up to that? Maybe. I'm still kind of agnostic on it, in the sense that I really I'm afraid to commit to one or the other, but I will say I lean on the side of having control, because, and not that you have a lot of control, but I think that you have enough control. And then I think it's been demonstrated and proven that if you believe you have free will, you make better decisions and you have better outcomes. If you believe you don't have free will, you end up making worse decisions and worse outcomes, and you end up being more reckless. Your behavior is more reckless. They've literally studied this. And so I found that super interesting, because for me, I'm like, okay, I think I have control, and I think I have free will, and I think I'm making decisions. And because I think that way, I've been able to manifest a lot of what I've been wanting out of life. And although your wants and needs are always going to be changing, as long as you're adapting to those as you gain more information, maybe something you thought you wanted, you learn later that you didn't want, then adjust the course, change it. As Chris D'Elia would say, change it. But seriously, change the course. So then I was like, okay, I feel like I need to close my eyes now. So I close my eyes and I kind of start going into it. It certainly felt like the Matrix. And it's probably just because it was recently in my mind that it demonstrated itself in that way, but that is how it presented itself. And I saw these tubes, and these tubes were every color of the rainbow, and they were shaped in the design of the internet, which is also shaped in the design of the neuron, which is a fun fact. It's actually kind of mind-blowing. And if you actually look at the structures of the larger structures of the universe, it kind of looks the same too. Coincidence? I don't think so. So then I started thinking about, after getting through the free will debate in my head, then I started thinking about, are we alone? Are we alone out there, or are we just, one of many in our galactic neighborhood? And that was when I started thinking about Bob Lazar. And I don't know if anybody has seen the Bob Lazar podcast with Joe Rogan, or if they've seen the documentary on Netflix. The documentary on Netflix, horrible. I didn't like it. I don't know. Now, here's the thing. What Bob would say was the best parts of that documentary, but the really dramatic, written bits, I forgot who was the actor. There's some famous actor. It was Mickey Rourke or something. I don't even know if it was him, but it was some famous actor had read some lines as an interlude, and I was just not a fan. I don't know. It was just cheesy. It didn't hit for me. And then on top of it, no disrespect to Jeremy Corbell, but he didn't need to be as in it as he was, because at the end of the day, the documentary was about Bob and it wasn't about him. So, and I guess that was something that really resonated with me, of that if I want to do a docuseries on people. The tough part is finding the time, and I already barely have enough time to do this podcast. But as I am able to kind of nail this process down and really crank out these podcasts more consistently, I eventually do want to do a docuseries on things, and I realize I don't really want to be very part of it. I kind of want the entire thing to be on the subject, because it's not about me. If you want shit to be about me, come to this podcast, and it's not even that this podcast is about me either, because it's usually about my guests. But if you want me, watch my solo episodes, but for my docuseries, I don't want to do that. I want it to be about the subjects, and I want to really highlight their stories in a way that is similar to how I do it here on the podcast, but is more production value and allows me to really use my skills that I went to school for. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Bob Lazar, and I was thinking about his story. And so for those who don't know who Bob Lazar is, he is an American physicist who says he worked at Area 51 at a place called S4. And let's see where S4 is located. Let's see. Yeah, so S4 is 15 miles south of Area 51. And he said that he worked in a U.S. military program to reverse engineer alien technology and power an anti-gravity propulsion craft in an alleged site called S4. And I'm going to be honest. When I watched that podcast, I was like, this is really cool if it's real, but I don't know if I believe this guy. I just don't know if I do. I'm kind of skeptical. I still don't know if I do. I don't know what to feel about him because on one hand, if this is true, there's not a lot of incentive for him to lie about it. Like, from my understanding, I don't think this has exactly made his life better. He gets raided by the FBI, and in fact, he does in the documentary too. And he's clearly had a hard life since coming out and talking about these things. And so that's where there is some degree of like, you might have done this because you genuinely felt like people needed to know, you know? And I could see that, especially because he got caught trying to record the flights of these things. And I think you can watch that video actually. But that being said, it was shot in like the 1980s. So the camera's not exactly good in low light. So it doesn't really, I don't think it really shows you anything. But, and so he's talking about it and he just seemed, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him. But I was thinking about the crafts and I was thinking about that concept and the aliens. And I was thinking about, I wonder how that works. And then I also thought about like, what if instead of aliens, the spacecraft is the alien? Because we sent rovers to Mars. Why wouldn't an alien species send a 100% autonomous device to all the planets to check out planets and figure out what's useful to them, right? To figure out what resources might be good or a place that they could go. Because if they're going to do it, why would you send your biological, easily could die, might not survive the travel creatures, when you could send a robot that, if it truly is intelligent like an AI would be, and theoretically if you're traveling the stars, you probably have the technology to have something that has an artificial intelligence, and I don't think you could travel the stars without an AI to assist you in that, whether it's calculations, piloting the craft, whatever, even creating the craft in the first place. And in order to travel the stars, you need something that can manipulate gravity or can warp space-time. Because if you can't do that, it's going to take forever. Because even if you approach the speed of light, even if you're able to get very close to the speed of light, you're talking about a huge problem of momentum, and you're talking about a huge problem of slowing down at your destination. And there becomes a lot of problems with trying to do that just by sheer propulsion. And so that's where he's proposing that these crafts that were being tested at this Area 51 site, were like anti-gravity or something, that they in some way had no propulsion, no jet engine, no nothing. And this thing is able to move. And he said it's like there's like a reactor, it's like a sphere, and you touch the sphere and you feel this like force field or something. And so I was thinking about that. I'm like, damn, like that's such a cool idea. I wonder what that's going to be. And then that made me think about something else. So after watching the Bob Lazar episode and then watching the documentary, I still was like really unsure. But then I learned about these videos that the Department of Defense released. And I think they released these in like 2017 or 2018. Let's see. Yeah, on December 17th, 2017, a newspaper printed a story titled "Real UFOs?" ? Pentagon unit tried to know. So basically, there's footage. There's 3 videos. And these 3 videos are of trained fighter pilots who see UFOs on their radar. And it's kind of like both amazing and terrifying at the same time. Because when you see this stuff, some people have said that they think it's an anomaly in the radar. I'm going to go ahead and say that too, for the skeptics, because I get it. Because I'm a skeptic too. And I'm still not sure I'm 100% on it. But these things, to me, this is the best evidence I've ever seen of anything UFO. And I'm going to be honest, I've never been into UFOs. I've never looked into it. I've always assumed that everybody who's saying it's a UFO is either somebody who doesn't know how the sky works and doesn't know that we're constantly being hit by things in space all the time. Like, I forgot the number, but there's like some number of tons of space debris that crashes into the Earth on a daily basis. So, for me, I'm just assuming it's like, a meteor or something that people just don't know it exists. Or my mind goes to the story of when I think it was in California, that there was a power outage, and then a ton of people reported UFOs in the sky, and it turns out it was literally just the stars, because that's how bad our light pollution is that they just weren't used to seeing the stars. So I saw that and I was like, okay, this is weird. These videos are very interesting. These videos are like, to me, the most credible evidence, because we're talking about people who are trained to know what a proper aircraft is like. They're trained to know what is realistic on what turns can be made, on the movements. And these things move in a way that seem to defy gravity. They genuinely do. They seem to genuinely move in a different way. And when I'm watching these things, and I'll see if I can find, because I have some of the videos pulled up here, and I'll turn the volume down. But basically, there's a couple of them. One of them is aboard. Let's see. So this one is called Fleur 1, and you can find all these videos online. And this is the second of the 3 U.S. military videos of the UFOs, or they call them unidentified aerial phenomenon, because they know that UFO comes a lot of baggage. Sorry, fuck that. We're calling them UFOs. Everybody knows what a UFO is. I get it that people think of like aliens and little green men, and I don't think that, that's not what this is here. But yeah, so this was part of a declassification of something that, by the way, it was part of a program called AATIP. And AATIP, which I should probably get the fucking acronym correct here. But AATIP was basically designed, it was a $22 million investment from the Department of Defense to look into the UFO phenomenon. And the reason why they wanted to look into it is because a lot of their jet pilots and fighter pilots were actually running into these things. And it got to the point where there had been enough stories of them that they actually needed to look into it. And so we spent $22 million on it. And there are some questions about the $22 million and the investment, in regards to like people thinking it was like a political game where, Senator Reid, it was like his friend with Bigelow Industries. And it's like Bigelow Aerospace, it was the company, and it was this billionaire, something Bigelow. I can't fucking remember his first name. Sorry if I'm like bro sciencing the fucking facts here. But so anyway, there are some questions about the funding, in the sense that like they think it's like it was just a favor to a friend type thing. I'm gonna be honest. After looking into it, I don't think that it's just that. I think this actually is something that needed to be investigated. And you could argue that maybe Bigelow getting the contract was a little bit of like some political grease into the hands, but I don't think the act of studying it was necessarily something that was problematic. I think it needed to be studied based on the reports that these pilots were putting in. So anyway, AATIP stands for Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. So this was a classified program where they were looking into this UFO phenomenon, and they were trying to gather all the evidence to figure out what the hell is going on. So this one video, Fleur 1, this is the second video of the 3, and this was released during the 2004 Nimitz incident that has, it was taken aboard a FA-18 Super Hornet. And this footage was captured by a Raytheon Advanced Targeting forward-looking infrared, and that's an ATFLIR pod, which contains the most advanced sensors and powerful tracking systems on the market. So that we're talking about something that truly can identify other threats in the sky and can detect their velocity, can detect their altitude, their shape, where they're going. This is not like just some guy looking up in the sky being like, "Oh, I think that's an alien." It's like, no, this is advanced equipment designed to track other potentially advanced crafts. And the other thing that you have to remember too with this is that AATIP and the people studying this stuff, these people are trained in identifying the threats in the air, even from other countries. So, you could make the argument, oh, is this, maybe it's just Russia or China and they have some crazy shit that we don't know about. But this thing actually moves in a way that according to the experts who are constantly seeing the enemy. Like, you know, they know what the enemy's advanced aircrafts are. They know what their drones are capable of. They have a good idea of the ballpark of what we're capable of, as well as what they're capable of. So they were studying this stuff, knowing already kind of the baseline of the best shit that China's got, the best shit that Russia's got, and all that. And this thing was taken aboard this Super Hornet. And you can actually watch interviews of this pilot, by the way. And this thing... And they kind of show you like what the different sensors mean on the HUD. So let me see if I can skip ahead here. And I think they call this one. Do they call this one the Tic Tac Incident or Tic Tac? Yeah. But basically, this thing moves. This thing moves in a way that like is unbelievable. So he tracks in on this thing, and he sees it, and it's kind of just like. I don't know. It's kind of just like it really just looks like a Tic Tac, honestly. And I'll put links in the description so you guys can watch these too, because these are super interesting. And this thing moves at speeds that just don't make sense. And he's tracking it. He's then trying to, I think he tries to chase after this thing. Let's see if I can skip ahead to it. Yeah. So this thing, he's tracking it, and eventually it just speeds out of the picture. And, you know, keep in mind, he sees this, I think, on more than just the radar. I think he's also seeing it, you know, his own firsthand account. And so this thing is like, okay, that's really interesting. So then there's another one. And this one is called Gimbal. And this was the first UFO video. So let's see. So this one, yeah, this one right here. Sorry, I'm pulling it up on the iPad. So let's talk about this. And the cool thing about these videos, whoever made these fucking videos, and I'll put this link in the description, is they really do a good job explaining kind of what the HUD is saying, the direction that it's in, the degrees that it's angled at, all that stuff. And this is all stuff being tracked by some of the most advanced technology possible. And so they're at an altitude of 25,000 feet. We're watching this thing move. And he's like, the guy's like, it's a fucking drone, bro. And he said, there's a whole fleet of them. Look at that. My gosh. And he's like, they're all going against the wind. He's like, the wind's 120 knots out west. Look at that thing, dude. Like, these people, keep in mind, they see fucking normal planes all the time. So that wouldn't blow their mind, right? And they're looking at it. And this thing, all of a sudden, he's like, that is a... Look at that thing. Then this thing turns. It literally rotates in a way that makes no fucking sense. So that's like, that's really weird, right? So then there's a third one. And the third one, I think, is called Go Fast. Let's see if I can find that here. Yeah, because, the Navy pilot's named David Fravor. He's the one with the 2004 one. Let's see. I don't know if this article has the fucking third one on here. Yeah, I don't see the Go Fast one. I might have pulled that up in another article. Hold on. Yeah, so the one with the rotation is really weird. The Go Fast one. So this one happened in 2015, and this was leaked in 2017. And I'm going to pull up this one real quick. So this one, to me, was the most interesting, because this one is one where, they're all talking to each other. And, so this thing is moving at incredible speeds. And this guy who's flying this just barely catches onto this thing, and he tracks it. So his tracking system is literally tracking it. And you're looking at it, and he's like, what the fuck is that thing? Did you box a moving target? And he's like, no, it's an auto track. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, oh my gosh, dude. He's like, wow, what is that, man? He's like, look at that flying. And it's going at crazy speeds. And I watched another video from a fighter jet that the thing goes into the water and doesn't slow at all. You know, normally when you see it hits the water, it would have some sort of noticeable impact of hitting resistance. And this thing doesn't hit any resistance at all. So I'm just like, okay, I don't know what these things are. I'm not going to say they're aliens, but 100% they're technology that does not exist at the moment, at least not to our knowledge. So either the government has some amazing technology that they're sleeping on us with, or this is something that nobody on the planet knows what it is. Or maybe they do know what it is. But it's either way, it's something that seems to be affecting gravity. So then when you combine that with Bob Lazar's story, which if taken at face value, which again, I'm kind of skeptical, so I don't know. But if taken at face value, then if they were studying these things at S4, and that was back in the 80s, then that means that they still have some of these crafts, that maybe these crafts are being flown by Americans, right? They could just be, you know, these could just be test flights in these things, and not even aliens, but just, you know, maybe at one point this craft was something that was foreign and it isn't something that we built, but it was something that is maybe being flown by Americans now, or being flown by humans now. So I'm pretty agnostic on whether they are aliens or not, because I don't know. They really could just be, you know, human beings. But the fact that this thing seems to have like anti-gravity or some type of propulsion, that there's no discernible engine. And that's the thing, is that you could normally see that. For people who are trained in this shit, like you can tell when there's like a jet stream, or you can see where the propulsion's coming from, or anything like that. And the shapes of these things based on the radar data is not implying that at all. It's implying that there's no thrust, there's no propulsion. And the fact that it moves at the speeds that it does is also impossible in terms of like what our current level of understanding of our most advanced fighter jets are. And of course, we know that the U.S. government, I'm sure, got some super crazy secret, you know, stuff. But if it is still propulsion based, it doesn't matter, because the things that we're seeing here are turning on a dime. They're rotating. They're moving in ways that are not possible with a typical aircraft. And I think are only moving in a way that is maybe somewhat possible by a helicopter, but not at the altitude that it's at, and not in the way that it's moving. So this was something that has like totally blown my mind. And it was something that I definitely thought about on the trip, where I'm like, what the fuck are these things? And maybe we're not alone in the universe. And if it actually is aliens, and again, I'm going to remain agnostic about that, because I've always been a skeptic of it. But if they are aliens, that completely changes the world. I mean, that changes everything. And the fact that this information is not public, if it is true, and if we know that for a fact, like if the government actually has like enough evidence that they know that this is an alien craft, even if they can't communicate with it or stop it in any way, then, I mean, we need to know that stuff. I think we need to know that kind of information. But I thought that was like so mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, how the fuck did I not know that this existed? And these videos are just fascinating. And when you listen to the interview of that pilot from the 2004 incident, the Tic Tac incident, he's like a guy who doesn't even want to believe in aliens. He's just like, I just can't explain what I saw. And I found that to be like amazing. So anyway, so let's see. Talking about Bob Lazar. Yeah. And so then I was thinking about like, well, what would society do if we revealed to people like that aliens are real and that we're being visited, and like, you know, what would it change? It also inspired me. I came up with some science fiction ideas and stuff from that, or like, you know, literally stopped and took down some notes. Might use that in some shit later. And it also made me realize that even if this shit is super advanced, the reason why we can still see them and the reason why we can still track them is because at the end of the day, it is still matter that is taking up space. And even if it moves at incredible speeds, it can't hide the fact that it is taking up space and space-time. And because everything is interdependent and related to one another, it is logical that despite how advanced this thing is, it's impossible to be invisible from our radar systems, especially with how the radar systems work. You know, if an object is there, it's not going to not detect it. I guess the only way that they could fuck with our systems would be if they found a way to hack into it at the moment and scramble the signal, which I guess is possible, right? If they're that much more advanced than us. But that being said, they didn't in these circumstances because we were able to track them. So eventually, after I kind of went down that rabbit hole on aliens and everything, I came out of the room and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I felt truly reborn. I really felt like, all right, man, I guess this is time. It's time for the new shift. This is a new paradigm. And I've had a few of these paradigms since starting this internal journey. And this is one that to me feels like another level up, and it's something that I've earned it. I've worked hard for it. And it's not like this trip is the reason why. Like I said, I went into it already knowing what needed to be done. I just needed the motivation to do it. Not even so much the motivation as much as the ability to just break these deeply ingrained habits that are in my brain. And it will take, several weeks of doing something new to hopefully fully reprogram it. But it's very exciting for me to get to that point. I'm like really looking forward to it. So I get done with that. I eventually come out. Joey ends up coming out, and I tell him kind of like what's going on. We philosophize about some of the things that I learned. And we also talk a little bit about aliens, and, he kind of talks about some stuff. And then eventually we go out to like the skate park. I try to film him doing some tricks. It wasn't super successful, but it was still a really interesting experience. I got to experience kind of the culture of the skate park and like learning like how everybody takes their turns and how people get mad at each other when they almost run into each other. Rightfully so. You don't want to like fall and hurt yourself and stuff. But it was super interesting. And eventually we get back to the crib, and Joey just makes some food. He goes out and does Uber. And then I call a couple of my friends who I told them that I was doing the trip, and I talk with them, and they give me some really awesome insights based on the kind of things that I learned. And that is one of the beauties of the friendships that I've been able to find here, both in Chicago and in Florida, and really just here on this planet, is that I'm able to talk out some of these really big, heady ideas with them, and they give me their own feedback and their own ideas that get spurred from that. And they help me contextualize the experience even better for myself. So this was just one of those things where it was a life-changing experience, but not in a way where it was surprising me with information that I didn't know. It was mostly stuff I kind of already knew, but it gave me the belief and the passion to move forward with it and to really make the changes. So, now I'm several days later as I'm recording this. Totally been sober the whole time. Felt better than I felt in a long time, but also I've been feeling pretty good in general. Really since post my grandpa's funeral, I've been able to kind of move on a little bit from that as well. And that was something I also thought about on the trip. But I just feel really good. I feel very purposeful. I feel fulfilled. I'm excited to continue to do this podcast. I'm really excited to keep ramping it up. I'm trying my best to get my guests. The problem is people reschedule. I'm gonna be honest. People reschedule all the time. And so I only have, a couple days a week that I have off that is easy for me to then schedule. And, this is a process to set up even this setup right here. It looks really simple, right? I got the fucking maroon thing in the background and whatever, but like I have to set up the lights. This thing is actually a backdrop. It's like a portable backdrop. So I have to set that up, and there's a whole process. And so, I plan this out, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to record 2 podcasts on Friday, and then they both rescheduled. So then it's like, that sets me back, and then I don't have one for the week. And it's not because I wasn't trying to plan ahead and get ahead, because I was, and then they both reschedule, and then there's nothing I can do about it. So that's the tricky part about this, is that when I'm having guests on, it's reliant upon them to be reliable. And sometimes they aren't, or sometimes things come up, and I get it. I understand life happens, I'm not like knocking them, but it's just more of like, I take this really seriously. And I'm trying to do this stuff. And then sometimes, even though I did everything right and I set aside the time and I planned ahead and I was trying to shoot more than one so that I would have kind of a backlog that I then could release to you guys. And then, if they both bail, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't make them show up. So that's where it can always be a little tricky with coordinating with other people, especially with how finicky my schedule is. But I'm trying my best to try to get ahead, and eventually there's gonna be a point where I'm legitimately recording 2 in a day, And if I'm doing that every week, there is going to be a point where I have so many that I really will be able to release every week. So sorry that I couldn't release last week. It wasn't on purpose. I literally did everything I could, and it just didn't work out. And so due to the reschedulings, and who knows, maybe it'll work out that on the days that we've rescheduled that we'll actually go through with it. I don't know. Only time will tell. But I got no problem doing these solo episodes. These are things that I enjoy doing. And I like to really like parse out some ideas and share them with you guys and see what you guys think. So let me know what you think about my revelations for myself, and like if you've had anything similar to yourself, or you like were doing some habits that maybe you felt like you needed to change but weren't changing, and then what you did to kind of kick yourself in the ass to do it. And then also let me know what you think about the UFO thing. Like, I'd love for people to debunk this shit for me and then just show me why I should have no faith that it's an alien. Because again, I'm like pretty agnostic about it, and I've never been a big UFO guy. So as a big skeptic, these actually genuinely intrigue me, and I think these are the most credible pieces of data that we have, that something, I'm not saying it's an alien, something is out there that is flying in a way that is not possible with the technology that we know of at the moment. And if Bob Lazar's story is true, it could be America that has this stuff. But according to Bob, at least according to what they told him, it's an alien craft, meaning it's a craft that we didn't build. And it had no buttons or anything on it. So I don't know. I'm skeptical, but I'm also really fascinated, because this could be some of the biggest info to ever drop on this planet. Because if it's true and it really is something else, we have to rethink everything. And ideally, this will hopefully bring us together in a way that only another species could. Only another species could get all the racists to then team up with the other humans, would be like, well, I normally don't like this type of person. I'm sorry, I'm giving them a southern accent. I'm sorry for all the southern listeners, but I know I don't like this type of person, but I don't like those aliens more. No, but ideally the aliens, if it's an alien, right, and it's a civilization that is capable of interstellar travel, the odds that this species is like evil and ruthless and violent, I would say is not likely. Because if you're traveling the stars, there's no way you have that many egotistical and selfish attitudes and mentalities, because there's no way you would have gotten off your fucking planet. You just wouldn't have done it. So to me, the only way that a species could go interstellar is if they're all on the same page and they have some sort of global collective. That doesn't mean it has to be literally a one world, new world order, one world government type thing, but literally it's got to have some sort of like general cooperation across their own globe, because how else could you affect those kind of resources and that all of that technology and that advancement? It's going to take a level of maturity of the entire species. And that's something that I'd like to see from the human being species. I think we can. We're not right now, but I think we're in the growing phase, and this is the growing pains. And Donald Trump is, he's a representation of that, where he is a symptom of a larger problem. So yeah, I think this is an interesting concept that I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Please email me at thecosmicperspectivepod@gmail.com. Let me know if you believe in UFOs, if you have more credible videos that you want to send me or something like that, or if you are a total skeptic and you found a way to debunk all this stuff. But I'm going to be honest, from what I've seen from people who are like aerial experts, some of this stuff can't be just explained away by being regular jet propulsion technology. It just doesn't seem to be. So I'd love to hear all of your guys' thoughts. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the episode. Thank you for listening. And I'm finally a YouTuber, man. Like, look, I got the fucking setup and everything. And I'm the only thing that's missing is the jump cuts, which I'm not going to do because I don't know. I'm just not a fan of them. But okay, cool. See ya.